Nestled away in the remote Selkirk Mountains, the historic ghost city of Sandon, British Columbia, has been my seasonal workplace for the past 3 years. This year, I stepped into the role of Powerhouse tour guide. The Silversmith generating station is a unique historical treasure, preserving the technology and inventions of the world's most brilliant minds, highlighting the workings of the two rivals, Nikola Tesla and Thomas Edison. Join me as I take you on my final tour of the season. Welcome to Canada's longest running hydroelectric generating station. It's been operating continuously for 128 years. This metal section here was built in 1897. Its sole purpose was just to operate an air compressor across the room. That would be it over there. It just so happened to be the wealthiest mine in Sandon that eventually became the wealthiest mine in Canada. So therefore, they could afford to do all this brand new technology that was coming out back in that day. So this was for their drills, shovels, hoists, and such. And they also sent a little bit of electricity up to that mine as well. Now, there were 8 generating stations that operated in Sandon. 7 of them were just for mines, and 1 was for the city of Sandon itself. But in 1954, that Sandon generating station shut down, and this generating station started to produce the electricity for Sandon. And in 1963, the mine shut down, so therefore the air compressor was decommissioned at that point. But we were still producing electricity to Sandon itself. And then, in 2001, we joined the Run of the River project through BC Hydro, and we are now providing electricity to over 500 homes. So we take care of the neighboring communities of Silverton, New Denver, Roseberry Hills, Three Forks, including ourselves. Now, isn't that incredible? And we only run at a 50% capacity, so we could produce more if we wanted to. But you know how it goes with BC Hydro is you have tiers. So the more you use, the more you have to pay. Well, we have tiers too, but it's the other way around. The more we produce, the less we get paid. Go figure, huh? This here is called a weir intake. So there's no dams or reservoirs involved in our operation. We're just diverting a little bit of this creek water down into our pipes right here. For the first 20 years, they used a flume to send the water down into the generating station. But when they started to do all the upgrades into the generating station around 1916, 1917, they changed that flume into wood stave piping. And there's some samples of that on the back wall right there. And they used the wood stave piping for roughly 100 years. It was above ground on some cribbing, and of course it was starting to age out, leak, and vandalism was becoming an issue. So it was decided to upgrade it in 2017, and they went with this high-density polyethylene. And here's a sample of that. It's pretty thick, and that is buried underground. And they say that will last us about 300 years. Not that we'll be here to actually know that. Today, there are 4 intakes that service this generating station. Back in the day, though, it was these 2 right here. The one you saw in the picture is this one here, and this one is where all our donations are going to this year to fix next year. It's an old wood intake, so yes, we like to replace it to the steel one that you saw in that picture. Because, you know, as wood gets old and wet and it gets slimy and slippery, and well, it's not so safe to be working with anymore. So yes, that is what the plan is for next year. Now, winter time seems to be the bigger issue of water coming to the generating station due to ice forming. So way back in the day, they actually built a cabin near those 2 intakes just for the caretaker of the intakes to live in, so he can do nothing but break ice between the 2 intakes every day. And, well, we don't have to do that so much anymore because of those 2 extra intakes that were added on. And those 2 are right over here. And they were added on in 1994, 95-ish. And everything comes to a head at 610 feet above us. And I'll will share more about that when I get to the other side with you. But first, we're going to talk about this room that I'm standing in right now. Back in 1916, 1917 is when they did a whole bunch of upgrades in the generating station. And when they did so, there was also some other issues going on. One was a drought season, and the other was 3 sawmills operating, so they were consuming water as well. And there just wasn't enough water coming into this generating station to keep it running where it should be at. So the resolution to that was to put in an engine. So that's what they did. They put an engine in very similar to this one that you see here, except for the original engine had one more stack on the back here. And well, its flywheel that you see here was a lot smaller and narrower, and it was right here in this cement part, and it had a belt that pulleyed off of that barrel that's spinning right there. And that's how they got the engine started. And then they used diesel to run it thereafter. Now they used this engine off and on until 1950, and it was only supplementary to water loss. So if there was no water loss, there was no engine running. But if we did lose 20% of our water coming in, that's when the engines would be utilized. So back in 1950, they wanted to decommission this engine because they got a brand new one put in, which we will see at the end of this tour. And they're like, okay, let's turn this into a workshop. But how are we going to get rid of an engine that we literally built walls around? So guess what their brilliant idea was? To open every single door and window in this whole entire building. And they put little sticks of dynamite inside the engine and poof, blew it up right there on the spot. And then they took out the pieces bit by bit through the door. Let's continue on through, and we're going to take a little stop right here. So down here is an original Thomas Edison rechargeable battery from 1912. It had a 12-hour charge on it, and I will show you how they wore it. So the miners would wear this through a belt and on their back right here. And that's what was needed for their lamps on their hard hats. So that got rid of candles and carbide lanterns. So this is a carbide lantern right here. You put the carbide on the bottom, and then you put some water on top. The water would go down, and this would form a gas. And then they would flick the flint, and then the flame would come out. And at the top here was how they would adjust their flames. And also it gave better head protection because that just improved over time, as well as monitoring. So if you didn't bring your battery back after shift, where are you and what's happened? Because of course, lots of the injuries and loss of lives were inside the mines. That was the number one. And number 2 was avalanches. Unfortunately, a lot of miners lost their lives just walking to and from work. So yeah, this became a great safety feature for them. And now on to the epic center where all the magic happens. So straight down the line there is the governor. So I call the governor the brains of the operation. It just seems to know what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. Now it's spinning at 360 RPMs around, giving us a nice steady 60 hertz, which is what this generator needs to operate. Now beside the governor is the turbine. It's a Pelton wheel turbine with about 18 cups on it. This right here kind of gives you a little idea of what it looks like on the inside. On the other side of the turbine is where the water comes in. Now it goes through a needle valve that's applying the pressure onto the cups, and it gets the turbine spinning. Now the governor deflects off of the needle valve the pressure that it's applying, and it does all its adjusting from that, just through mechanisms. There's no computers involved in any of this. Now the governor is also very sensitive. If it feels that its system is in a threat, it will trip the plant. And when it does so, it waits for the human to figure out what the issue is. So is it a power outage on the grid? Or is there a branch on a line? Is the water fluctuating too much? Those are just some of the reasons on why the governor will trip the plant. And once we figure out the issue, then we can go ahead and fix it and then put the governor back into sync with the generator. But when the governor does that, the water's still coming in at full force. So the turbine will still spin, even though there's nothing being produced. Now this is our pride and joy right here. This is an original Nikola Tesla generator built through Westinghouse in 1905. It is the only Nikola Tesla generator still operating in Canada today. Now, it started its journey in Vernon in 1905, and it worked until 1916. And at that point, the generating station had caught fire, and well, this generator survived that fire. Now, if you know anything about Sandon's history, we had a big fire in Sandon in 1900, and this building actually never got harmed in that fire, yet it was pretty darn close. So I think it's pretty cool how two survivors of fires come together. So in 1916, this generator was brought to Sandon. Now it's a 3 polyphase generator, so we have 3 large coils and 20 magnets inside of it. Now, will you believe me if I tell you that everything is still original in it from the day it was built? And the only work that they've done on it in 120 years is re-insulating 1 coil. That's it. Isn't that amazing? So let's mosey on over to here. So this is one of 5 bearings on the shaft. And I will let you take a look on the inside there. So what you're seeing is the bearing and the oil. The bearings live in a mineral oil bath, so that's what gives them the protection, so the metals don't rub on each other. Now these bearings are a Babbitt style bearing. If you don't know what a Babbitt style bearing is, it's 2 C's that come together around the shaft and connect. Now, I want you to take a guess at how many times that we have to change our bearings. And if you answer 0, you would be correct. So, our first 2 bearings are Pelton's Babbitt bearings from 1897. The next 3 bearings are through Westinghouse, and I can guarantee that they are 1916 or older. We did not get the specs on the bearings, so we don't know if they're the original ones from the generator or they put new ones in when they put this generator into Sandon. But I get called out on my BS all the time about this. And I have engineers from other power plants who say, no, that's impossible, because we have to change our bearings all the time. So my question to them is, how often do you shut down your generators? And they're like, well, all the time. I mean, that is your problem right there. We only shut down 1 time every 10 years. I know, right? And that's when the government comes in, they do a whole inspection throughout the day and make their determinations, and then we get the green light, and voila, we're ready to go for another 10 years. Unless, of course, we have a specialty project to do or something like that, and then, of course, well, we have to shut down for that. So let's head on over to here. And straight across the way is where the water's coming in that pipe. And you can see there's a bit of a wide joint right there. Where the wide joint is where the needle valve is. It's about 4 feet in length and 4 inches in diameter. So we have a head of water at 610 feet above us. It comes down on about a 45-degree angle, giving us 13 cubic square feet of water per second, which produces about 240 psi. That is how much pressure is going into that turbine to make it spin. Now, once the water hits the cups on the turbine, it just slips right underneath the generating station, right back into the creek where you saw it spitting out there at the beginning of this video. So we are green certified, and this is the greenest, cleanest energy ever produced. Now we have the rheostat in this glass case. The rheostat's job is to produce a DC voltage. So if you are not aware, to create AC electricity, you need a DC voltage into the magnets. So that's what they would do with the rheostat, and it'd run through this little guy down here. So this little guy here is an exciter, or also known as a DC dynamo. So what it would do is send that DC voltage into the magnets of the generator, and then it can produce AC electricity. But because we're on BC Hydro, it comes from a different box and comes down this pipe right here into the generator. So we are still producing a DC voltage for the generator, just not in the way that we once used to. This is the original panel board of the generator, built in 1905. So up here, this is letting me know how many DC volts are going into the generator. This one is telling me how many volts the generator is producing. And this is how many kilowatts are being made at this time. Our voltage sits at about 23 to 2400, and the kilowatts we produce is 2400 kilowatts an hour, which is 2.4 megawatts. And the panel here is telling me how much kilowatts is going out onto our power lines. So we are producing a three-phase electricity, so we're taking care of 3 lines on the power pole. As you can see, they are actively moving, so they are doing their readings. And 1 and 2 are usually your lower lines, and number 3 is the top line. For the most part anyways. This here is a synchronizer. So this is what they would utilize to sync in the engines to the generator. So the 2 red lights at the top will alternate back and forth when we are in sync with one another. And behind us is the air compressor. So this is what it was all built for, this baby right here. This air compressor produced over 600 cubic feet of air per minute. So yeah, pretty powerful, considering your home ones do anywhere from 100 to 200 cubic square feet. Now this is a double piston. You have this and another one on the other side. It was belt pulley driven off of that barrel right there, so that is how it operated off the flywheel. This is the cooling station right here. So we utilize our own penstock water, because it's nice cold mountain water, to do all the cooling of the air. And it was important to cool down that air before it went into the receiver tank outside. As you can see, the receiver's out there. Now, there are no welds on that receiver. It's all riveted together. So that's why it's important to cool that air down before it goes into the receiver. Because if you don't, then it's going to be an explosion and those rivets are just going to pop right out. All right, now let's talk about the cups that are in the turbine where the water's hitting. This cup right here on the left is original, 1897, and the first replacement was in 1980 with this cup right here. Now, when they replaced the cups in 1980, they lost 15% efficiency, and they just didn't understand why. They were replacing worn out cups, so they thought. They didn't realize that that was actually the design of the cups. So if you didn't notice, there were cutouts on the bottom of the original cups. So this is how the cutouts work. When the water is pushing on this cup is already coming into play. So now the water can go through those cutouts and hit this cup just a little bit longer, which helps with efficiency, right? And also, the cutouts allow the water to spill out, because we don't need water cupping, we just need pressure of the water. That's it. So when the water's actually hitting the cups, it's like a breaststroke. That's kind of how it goes. So when you do a breaststroke, you can feel that pressure hit your chest in the water, right? So that was kind of, I guess, the way that Pelton designed his cups. So I like to think anyways. Our donations over the last few years got us new cups this year. And we went back to the original design from 1897. And guess what? We increased that 15% efficiency, and shockingly, it got quieter in here. It's not quite as loud. Now I've got something cool to show you. This is an original Thomas Edison light bulb. This is over 125 years old. So as you can see, the bottom of it here is ceramic. We had switched to glass in 1901. And I don't know if you can see in there very well, but there is a filament, and it's made of bamboo carbon. We had switched to tungsten in 1905. And as you can tell, it's hand blown because there's still a nipple on the top. Now, the cool story about this light bulb is someone decided to move one of our fire rings in a campsite, and it started an underground fire. Well, they started digging to put that fire out, and they started pulling out light bulbs out of the ground. We ended up with a whole bin full of light bulbs, and 5 of them still worked. And yeah, they're pretty hot. They're 110 volt a DC bulb. So who needed heaters back in the day? All you had to do is just leave your lights on. So yeah, really, really cool find. There's a couple more samples just over here. So yeah, there was many sizes anyways, not so much for shapes. As I'd stated, we are on the BC Hydro grid. So this is the BC Hydro box right here. So this is how everything is controlled now in the power station. So all our syncing, all our readings, everything like that actually comes off of this box right here. Now we'll head off into this room right over here. It's a lot quieter. So this is a Blackstone engine. When they decommissioned that first engine in 1950 and intentionally blew it up, this was the replacement. So it is much smaller, more efficient. It's a 4-stroke diesel versus the 2-stroke diesel engine that they were using in the first place. It didn't require a belt pulley system at all to start it. It was done by air compression. So yeah, I would just head on up here, through the pipe, down over here, and then you would have to do a manual oil pressure to bring all that up. And once that's done, you can start up your engine. Now, this engine has been in here for 75 years, and it still works. It is our backup if we ever need it. But guess what? We never do. So far, knock on wood, I don't have any close to me. But can you believe, of the 75 years that it's been in here, that it's only had to work 1 solid month in its life? I know, right? But we just don't have those water issues anymore, so there's really no need to utilize it. So yeah, pretty impressive. And we've also got a backup air compressor. I'm pretty sure it was put in at the same time as this generator, but it only has 1,500 working hours on it. And they would have only utilized that for, what, 13 years? Because they decommissioned that big generator in 1963. So yeah, very impressive. So this stuff is pretty much brand new, barely used, just has some age on it. This gives you an idea of what the original engine looked like that I was describing. And up at the top right there, that is how our water sprays out into the cups. And that's the needle valve right there. Kind of like a giant sewing needle. Pretty amazing stuff, isn't it? Now, I'm not sure if you're aware, but British Columbia was the second province to produce hydroelectricity. Nelson was the first town/city to actually produce hydroelectricity in British Columbia, but Sandon was the first city to fully electrify, meaning all residents, businesses, and streets were electrified. And that there is how a tour with me through this power generating station would be. So I thank you so very much for tagging along. Until next time, bye-bye.